sort of another non-question. I mean, do we like them as a band?
Yeah, I mean that.
When people hear the name Mick Jagger, they usually picture the ultimate rock and roll frontman, a whirlwind of energy strutting across stages for over 60 years. The Rolling Stones frontman has been the pulse of rock history, delivering hit after hit and never slowing down. But while the spotlight may shine on Jagger's showmanship, few know about the sharp tongue hiding behind that famous smirk. Unlike many rock stars who play nice with their peers, Mick has never been afraid to speak his mind, even when it stings. Rock and roll isn't about being nice, he once said. It's about being honest. That honesty has sparked some serious tension in the music world. From snide backstage remarks to brutal interview quotes, Jagger's relationships with fellow musicians often took a turn toward the hostile. His feuds go far beyond personal drama. They're battles over what rock music should be. Today, we're counting down the top 6 bands Mick Jagger hated the most. From classic rivals to modern rock giants he dismissed as bland, fake, or downright embarrassing. Number 6, Coldplay. Few bands have pushed Mick Jagger's buttons quite like Coldplay. As their fame skyrocketed in the early 2000s, the Rolling Stones were trying to stay relevant in a changing music scene. And let's just say, Jagger was not impressed. He absolutely sees whenever Coldplay comes up, said longtime Stones photographer Mark Seliger. To Mick, Coldplay represents everything wrong with modern rock. Safe, sanitized, and emotionally overcooked. The real trigger? Frontman Chris Martin. His earnest, piano-driven ballads and tearful performances didn't sit well with the Stones' tougher legacy. Backstage at Live 8 in 2005, after watching Martin perform, Jagger reportedly muttered to drummer Charlie Watts, "Is this what passes for rock now? A man crying at a piano?" We'd have been laughed off the stage for that. The resentment only grew when Coldplay beat the Stones at the 2009 Grammys. Jagger was furious, allegedly calling Coldplay music for people who don't actually like music, and said their acceptance speech was nauseatingly fake. And in one of his coldest public disses, during a 2011 Australian interview, when asked about Coldplay's influence on British music, Jagger paused, then said, "Well, they've certainly made it acceptable to be incredibly boring." Even as Coldplay continued selling out stadiums, Mick stayed ruthless. At a private dinner in 2015, he told producer Rick Rubin, "They're not the worst band in the world, just the most successful mediocre one." Number 5, Led Zeppelin. The rivalry between the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin is the stuff of rock legend. In the 1970s, both bands were fighting for the crown of the world's greatest rock act. But behind the scenes, Mick Jagger wasn't just watching Zeppelin rise, he was fuming. Mick couldn't stand how quickly they took off, revealed former Stones manager Marshall Chess. The Stones worked for years to build their name. Zeppelin just exploded overnight. And that hard, thunderous Zeppelin sound? Jagger thought it made the Stones seem old-fashioned. During a fiery moment in London's Triton Studios in 1971, Jagger allegedly lashed out, calling Robert Plant's vocals prehistoric wailing and slamming Jimmy Page's solos as masturbatory nonsense. Things got worse in 1973 when both bands hit the road on competing tours. After a journalist asked Jagger about Zeppelin breaking attendance records, he snapped, "If making an unholy racket is what sells tickets, maybe we should all just bang trash can lids together and call it music." Even decades later, the bitterness stuck. In a 2018 BBC radio interview, when asked about Zeppelin's influence, Mick offered a dry jab. They were quite good at what they did, if you like bombastic, overblown stuff. When the interviewer noted Zeppelin's massive fan base, Jagger coolly replied, "McDonald's is popular too, darling. Doesn't make it gourmet." The message was loud and clear. Jagger never bought into Zeppelin's hype, and he never forgave them for stealing the spotlight. Number 4, The Clash. When punk rock burst onto the scene in the late 1970s, it shook the music world and bruised a few egos along the way. One of those egos, Mick Jagger's. And his biggest issue with the punk wave was The Clash. To Jagger, they weren't just loud and political, they were arrogant. Mick found their holier-than-thou attitude insufferable. wrote Keith Richards in his autobiography Life. He'd grumble, "We were breaking the rules while they were still in diapers." And it didn't help that Clash frontman Joe Strummer kept calling the Stones out. Strummer once slammed them as millionaire tax exiles pretending to be rebels. Jagger didn't take that lightly. According to Stones saxophonist Bobby Keys, Mick fired back in rehearsal. 3 chords and a slogan isn't a revolution. It's a tantrum with a guitar. Things came to a head backstage at the 1978 Rock Against Racism concert. Strummer tried to introduce himself. Jagger allegedly gave him a cold stare and said, "Talk to me when you've had a hit in America," before walking off. Brutal. And Mick kept jabbing. In a 1979 Rolling Stone interview, he dismissed punk bands like The Clash. They think making political statements makes their basic music important. I'd rather listen to someone who can actually play. Even after Strummer passed away in 2002, Jagger's tribute was cutting as ever. Joe certainly believed in what he was doing, even if what he was doing wasn't particularly sophisticated. The message? Mick didn't see The Clash as dangerous or revolutionary, just loud kids pretending to be legends. Number 3. Aerosmith. You'd think Mick Jagger might appreciate a band that clearly idolized him. But with Aerosmith, it was the opposite. Instead of feeling flattered, Jagger felt ripped off. "They sounded way too much like the Stones," said longtime producer Andrew Logoldham. And that annoyed the hell out of Mick. He saw them as cheap American knockoffs. The tension bubbled in the 1970s when Aerosmith started climbing the charts with swagger-heavy hits that echoed the Stones' bluesy vibe. But Jagger wasn't impressed. At a 1976 New York industry party, he reportedly cornered Steven Tyler and sneered, "Imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, darling, but it's still just imitation." What especially irked Jagger? Tyler's stage antics, often compared to Mick's own wild performances. After seeing Aerosmith on TV in 1977, Jagger allegedly told friends, "If I wanted to see a bad copy of myself, I'd go to a funhouse mirror." Ouch! In the 80s, while the Stones were struggling commercially, Aerosmith found new life with hits like Walk This Way, thanks to Run DMC. But instead of giving credit, Jagger took another jab, saying in an old MTV interview, "Recycling old ideas with a drum machine isn't creative, it's desperate." And in 2016, when asked yet again about Aerosmith in a SiriusXM interview, Mick delivered one of his most backhanded compliments ever. "They've built a pretty solid career out of sounding like we did in 1971. I guess someone had to." To Jagger, Aerosmith wasn't a rock band. They were a tribute act with a record deal. Number 2, Bon Jovi. If there's one band that truly got under Mick Jagger's skin during the 1980s, it was Bon Jovi. At a time when the Stones were struggling to fill arenas, Bon Jovi was packing stadiums full of screaming fans. And to Mick, it felt like a personal insult. He thought they were everything wrong with rock, said former Atlantic Records exec Phil Carson. Mick called them rock and roll for people who don't actually like rock and roll. What really bothered him? The packaged image, the perfect hair, the radio-friendly sound, and the polished performances. During a meeting for the 1989 Steel Wheels tour, Mick reportedly ranted about how pretty boys with hairspray were outselling the Stones. He even dismissed John Bon Jovi as a corporate creation with good teeth and bad songs. Things got icy at the 1989 MTV VMAs when both bands performed. Backstage, Jagger snubbed John Bon Jovi's handshake, later telling Ronnie Wood, "All you need now is tight jeans and 3 power chords to be a rock star." And he didn't stop there. In a 1990 Q magazine interview, Mick doubled down. "Bon Jovi? That's not rock and roll. That's greeting card sentiment with a distortion pedal." When the interviewer brought up their huge record sales, Jagger fired back with one of his most famous burns. "McDonald's sells billions of burgers. Doesn't make it good food, does it?" Even years later, the tension lingered. At a 2013 music industry event, they reportedly stayed at opposite sides of the room. And when asked if he'd ever collaborate with Bon Jovi, Jagger deadpanned, "I'd rather record with my vacuum cleaner. At least it makes an interesting noise." Number 1, Nickelback. And now we arrive at the band that, according to insiders, Mick Jagger despises the most, Nickelback. Yes, the Canadian rock group that sold millions of records and filled arenas worldwide has been the target of some of Jagger's most brutal takedowns in recent years. Despite their commercial success, Mick sees them not as rock stars, but as everything wrong with modern music. They represent the death of rock soul, said Rolling Stones bassist Daryl Jones in a 2015 interview. Mick said it more than once. Nickelback is what the Stones fought against. The feud became public in 2006 when both bands were headlining separate festivals in Germany. When a journalist asked Jagger how he felt about sharing the spotlight with Nickelback, he snapped, "I wasn't aware we were sharing anything. I don't consider what they do to be in the same universe as us." It got worse in 2008 when Chad Kroeger dared to cite the Rolling Stones as an influence. According to backup singer Bernard Fowler, Mick read the quote and exploded. "Influence? The only thing we influenced them to do was cash in. At least we had something to say." By 2013, during a rare BBC radio interview, Jagger was asked about the state of rock music. His response? "When bands like Nickelback are what people think rock is, no wonder kids are turned to other genres. They've stripped rock of everything that made it matter. Danger, sex, rebellion, and replaced it with Hallmark lyrics and corporate logos." And the harshest blow of all came during a 2017 Rolling Stone interview when Mick declared, "Rock isn't dead, but certain bands are trying to kill it. Nickelback isn't just bad. They're harmful to what rock and roll is supposed to be." When the interviewer pointed out their huge fan base, Jagger rolled his eyes and delivered this now legendary line. "Just because millions buy something doesn't make it good. Millions catch the flu every year too." Brutal. Direct. Classic Mick.